All right, hello everybody. So today we're going to be talking about knowledge as justified true belief, and we're going to be talking about Gettier cases as well. So the goal here is to entertain some potential definitions of knowledge, and then raise counterexamples to those proposed definitions of knowledge, such that we show that those aren't the right definitions. Okay, so we're going to just like practice one real quick. So this is a potential hypothesis about the nature of knowledge. Okay, so let's say that knowledge is belief based upon evidence, right? Okay, so what does that mean? That means that every time you have a belief based on evidence, that means that that counts as knowledge. And every time you have knowledge, you have beliefs that are based on evidence. Okay, so this means that in all cases where a person S, right, that could be Spencer, that could be you, that could be anybody, person S believes some proposition P, and S possesses evidence that P, are cases such that S knows the proposition that P. Okay, so we're going to be trying to raise a counterexample that shows that somebody can have evidence for a proposition that P or a belief that P, and it still doesn't amount to knowledge. So that's going to be our goal. So here's the proposed definition of knowledge right here at the bottom. S knows that P if and only if S believes P on the base, believes based on evidence that P, right? So the idea is I know that P whenever I have evidence that suggests that P is the case, right? Okay, and I believe P based on that evidence. So we're going to be raising a counterexample that goes from the right to left direction of fit. So the idea is we're going to say that we can have a belief that is based on evidence that does not amount to knowledge. Now, we could have a counterexample that goes from left to right, which would say that we have knowledge without belief based on evidence, but our counterexample will go from right to left and not the other way. Okay, so what is this potential counterexample? So let's imagine that knowledge is belief based upon evidence. Okay, so if knowledge is belief based on evidence, then in any case where Sally has a belief that P based on some evidence, then Sally knows that P. Okay, that's just kind of what the biconditional says, right? That's like what the definition of knowledge says. So in all cases where you believe P on the basis of evidence, you've got knowledge every single time. Okay, so let's suppose that Sally believes that John is guilty of some particular crime. And Sally has some evidence for that belief. But let us suppose further that John is not guilty of that crime, right? So suppose John is found at a crime scene and John says, look, I didn't do it. But there is some evidence that John actually did the crime. Maybe his fingerprints are somewhere. And so Sally forms the belief based on the fingerprints that John committed the crime, right? But in fact, he didn't. So premise 3, therefore, Sally does not know that John is guilty of that particular crime, despite the fact that she believes that he is, and she has some evidence for her belief. And this is mostly because her belief is false. She falsely believes that John committed the crime, even though she forms the belief on the basis of evidence. So, therefore, it is false that in any case where Sally has a belief that P, based upon some evidence, then Sally knows that P. Thus, it follows from that by modus tollens that it is not the case that knowledge is belief based upon evidence. So, the idea here is that, look, we build a case, right? And we demonstrate that somebody has the conditions for knowledge, but strongly seems not to have knowledge, even though they have whatever conditions met. So that's the idea here. This is kind of like our practice round, right? So so it looks like knowledge isn't just belief based on evidence. Another case that we could talk about would be something like, um, I don't know, suppose that there's evidence that suggests that John did do the crime, and there's also evidence that suggests that John didn't do the crime, right? So these are mutually exclusive propositions, right? They're one's false and one's true. But if evidence goes in both ways, it seems like merely believing in one evidence that or one conclusion doesn't make it the case that you exclude the other conclusion, right? So mutually exclusive um, propositions can both have evidence that favors them. Okay, so that might be one other way we could respond to this analysis of knowledge. Okay, so now we're going to turn to the justified true belief analysis of knowledge, right? So this is Edmund Gettier's target. Was also going to be our target for today. So what is the justified true belief account of knowledge? Well, it says that knowledge is what? Justified true belief, right? So S knows that P, if and only if, right? So necessary and sufficient conditions, uh, that S has a justified true belief that P, right? So whenever you have a justified true belief, that belief counts as knowledge. And whenever you have knowledge, you've got yourself a justified true belief. Okay? Okay, so we might be wondering, well, how does Gettier's counterexample work? Gettier is going to give us a counterexample that works from the right to left direction of fit. So we're going to have an instance where someone has a justified true belief that P, but fails to know that P, right? Or at least it's going to be strongly intuitive that they fail to know that P. Okay. So let's just like go over each of these conditions. So first of all, S has to believe that P, right? And so when we talked about on truth from the Creel text, he gave us a lot about what beliefs are, right? So recall that a belief is endorsing a proposition with a given degree of confidence. I believe something if and only if I will, to whatever sufficient degree, which we can debate about, I endorse with confidence that proposition. I look outside, it's raining. Somebody comes in, asks me, "Hey, is it raining outside?" I say, "Yeah, of course it's raining outside. Look, you know." And so that means that I am endorsing the proposition, "It is raining outside," um, with a certain degree of confidence, right? And so it seems like I believe it. And if I do believe it, then when I'm asked, I would say yes or no to a given proposition. Okay, so and then justification. So S has justification that P, if and only if S has a sufficient degree of evidence that points to the truth of P, right? So we might say that kind of like the last analysis we looked at, um, we might think of all the things that favor a proposition's being true. So, for example, if it's raining outside, right? What gets to count as evidence that it's raining outside? Well, it's my perceptual experience as of it raining, right? So I see that it's raining. Maybe I put my hand out, feel the rain. Those are all perceptual experiences, and those also count in favor of it raining, right? Similarly, somebody might say, I might ask somebody, hey, is it raining outside? And they say, yeah, it is raining outside. I have the testimonial that it's raining outside. That counts, or at least according to many people, that counts as evidence that would favor the proposition that it's raining outside, right? And so if I have testimonial experience and I have maybe perceptual experience, I might be able to say, look, I have some evidence that favors the proposition that it's raining outside, and then that evidence, the total sum of that evidence, is justification to believe that it's raining outside. Okay. Okay. So you believe something, and you are justified in believing that thing, right? But you can have justification for false beliefs. This is a widely accepted claim. So not all justified beliefs are true. For example, in the Middle Ages, a lot of people thought that the Earth was the center of the solar system, right? And there was a lot of evidence that suggested that that's the case. But that's also not, strictly speaking, true, right? And so even though the evidence favored a geocentric model of the universe at the time, it wasn't necessarily the case that it's true that that's the correct model of the universe or the solar system. And so it follow or not, it doesn't follow, but like P has to be true. Okay, so you have to have a justified belief that is also true. Okay, and remember that a necessary and sufficient claim is a definitional claim. So all instances of justified true beliefs are knowledge, and all instances of knowledge are justified true beliefs. Okay? All right, so cue Edmund Gettier. Gettier is going to raise a counterexample to the JTB analysis of knowledge. So the idea here is that he is going to say that, look, we have an instance where we have a justified true belief that does not amount to knowledge. Okay? So we can have knowledge, or excuse me, we can have justified true beliefs that do not amount to knowledge. And if you are able to show just in one instance that you have a justified true belief that doesn't amount to knowledge, that means that the biconditional isn't true in every case. But the biconditional claims to be true in all cases. And so that means that the biconditional is false. Okay. So before he gets into his article, right, before he proposes his case, he starts with two assumptions. A couple facts about these assumptions. He actually didn't need to make these assumptions in order to propose the Gettier case. So one thing is that this paper is one of the most widely cited philosophy papers ever. Like in some cases more cited than Plato. And so this paper has thousands of citations, and that means that a lot of people are working with this case or trying to work out of this case or whatever. And so these two assumptions have gotten a lot of attention. Turns out he can make the argument without these two assumptions. But let's just give him the two assumptions and we'll explain them. So first, he assumes that false beliefs can be justified. We already talked about this briefly, but this is a widely accepted assumption, right? So it's almost weird that he makes the assumption because it's just so widely accepted. But the idea is that, look, there's evidence that favors things that are false, right? So, I mean, we looked at abortion, so people want to say it's always morally wrong to have an abortion. People want to say it's always morally okay to have an abortion. And then they cite different arguments. And those arguments amount to evidence that favors the sides. But presumably, if we're like moral objectivists, we would say that one of the sides is wrong, right? It is either always wrong to have an abortion or always morally okay to have an abortion, right? Or maybe they're both wrong and it's sometimes okay to have an abortion and sometimes not. In any case, though, um, that we have justification or evidence that favors all of these different sides, but they all can't be true. So that means that we have evidence that supports a false claim or a false proposition. And so, similarly with our beliefs, false beliefs can, in fact, be justified. Okay, and then the second thing is the principle of deductive closure, which is like a super cool principle. So, the idea is that deduction can transmit justification from one belief to another. Okay, what the hell does that mean? It's like super technical. So let's imagine that S is justified in believing that P. Okay, so suppose it's raining outside, and I believe that on the basis of perceptual experience, and I'm therefore justified in believing that. And then suppose that we competently deduce another proposition, Q, from P. The idea is the very same justification that you have for P, you have, you also have that justification for Q. Okay, there's actually a typo here. Then S is justified in believing Q. That's what it should say there. I apologize for the typo. Okay, but the idea is something like, let's say you know P, or you're justified in believing that P. You deduce a new proposition from the other proposition, Q. You're also justified in believing that Q is the case as well. When you're doing deductions, justification sort of transmits or moves along with the new propositions that you come to. Okay, and we'll see how that plays out in the case. So, yeah. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. So anyway, so here are two assumptions that are going to be underpinning much of Edmund Gettier's case here. Okay. And then we have the classic, they're just called Gettier cases. Um, it's cool. He is actually not doing philosophy anymore because this paper got way too much attention according to his opinion, and he thinks he kind of ruined epistemology in virtue of publishing this paper. But the paper is just so famous that the cases are just called Gettier cases, and everybody knows what that means. Okay, so we're going to be examining a case that shows that you can have a justified true belief that doesn't amount to knowledge. Okay, so suppose you have two people, Smith and Jones, and they've both applied to a particular job. Okay, so let's just suppose that that they're both there for a job interview. Okay, and Smith and Jones are like in the waiting area. Suppose it's like a big accounting firm, and so there's a large area for different people to wait for their different appointments, right? And so Smith and Jones are both applicants who are applying for the same job, and they have interviews that are at different moments, right? But they both are there at the same time. So suppose that Smith justifiably believes that Jones will get the job and that Jones has 10 coins in her pocket. Okay, so Smith is sitting in the waiting area and, kind of listening in to some of the other employees. And they say something like, Jones is going to be the one that gets the job. So Smith is eavesdropping and hears somebody say, like a higher up person, say that Jones is probably going to get the job. And then suppose that after Smith hears that, Jones just randomly says, excuse me, Smith, I've got 10 coins in my pocket. Okay, and so Smith justifiably, right, or on the basis of evidence, believes two propositions. One, that Jones is going to be the one to get the job, and two, that Jones has 10 coins in her pocket. Okay. And so, like any rational entity, Smith reasonably infers a new proposition on the basis of these two propositions, namely that the successful candidate, the person who's going to get this job, has 10 coins in her pocket. Okay? So, she believes that Jones is going to get the job. She believes that Jones has 10 coins in her pocket. She forms a new belief, right, that the person that gets the job has 10 coins in their pocket. Okay, so let's just suppose that the way that it works out, it happens that the executive person got their names confused and actually meant to say Smith. So it's Smith that gets the job and not Jones, right? And let's propose further that Smith happens to have 10 coins in her own pocket, right? So, and maybe even Smith doesn't know that either, right? And so it seems like Smith has a justified, true belief that the successful candidate has 10 coins in her pocket. You follow me on this? Okay. So, um, even though Smith believes that Jones is the one that's going to get the job and that Jones has 10 coins in her pocket, and then uh, derives a new proposition, right, or a new belief that the successful candidate has 10 coins in their pocket. Little does she know that she is actually the successful candidate and she has 10 coins in her pocket, right? So turns out that she has justification for that belief, right? That belief is true and she believes it, right? So she has a justified true belief. However, Smith doesn't know that the successful candidate has 10 coins in her pocket, right? And this is where we have to go with our intuition here. So, does Smith really know that that proposition is true? The idea is that it kind of feels like no, right? So it kind of it feels like it feels something like it should be the case that that Smith doesn't know, right? Even though she seems to have a justified true belief, that justified true belief does not yet amount to a knowledge claim. That's kind of the hunch, right? And a lot of people agree with that. So we would say that go backwards real quick. We would say that we have S, right? Smith having a justified true belief, but that justified true belief does not amount to knowledge. So this is a right to left hand counterexample that suggests that we can have the conditions for knowledge and yet not obtain knowledge, right? Right to left hand counterexamples tend to show that the definition is too weak, right? That is, we need more conditions in order to get to knowledge, in order to get the thing on the left hand side, right? There are also counterexamples that suggest that somebody can know without having a justified true belief as well. That would be a case that shows that this is too strong, that our example is too strong, right? So just for clarification, so Edmund Gettier's case is a left or a right to left hand counterexample that shows that the definition is too weak. Okay, and we can look at other important Gettier style cases, right? So, and I'll go over these relatively quickly. In the no got have it case, let's suppose you work in an office and you have two coworkers, no got and have it, right? And so Habit is always talking about his Corvette, right? Okay, and so blah blah blah, like Habits like showing off his new Corvette. You see him pull up in the Corvette in the parking lot, and so and then you have No God, or excuse me, No God. No God is the one that potentially has the Corvette, right? So he's pulling up in the Corvette, and he's talking about his Corvette and blah blah blah, and then Have It is like a relatively quiet person, and he is um, somebody that you like don't really hear too much about, and blah blah blah, and this and that. So on the basis of No Got saying that he has a Corvette, um, you derive the belief somebody in our office has a Corvette, right? So the idea here is that you are deducing a new belief, right, on the basis of these two people. Look, somebody in our office has a Corvette, right? Uh, okay, but it turns out that No Got, the Corvette that he drives is actually his cousin's Corvette. And let's suppose he lives with his cousin, and his cousin's name is on the title, and his cousin pays for the car note on it, right? And it's not actually his. And let's suppose that Have It, even though Have It's really quiet, he is restoring a Corvette at his house, right? So he's the owner of a Corvette, even though, let's say, it's not even functioning. So we have a justified true belief that somebody in the office has a Corvette, right? But it doesn't seem like that belief, that even though it's justified and true, it doesn't seem like that belief amounts to knowledge, because you don't have you don't believe rightly about the people, right? So No God, you believe that No God is the one with the Corvette, and not Have It, right? So anyway, so this is a counterexample that functions just like the Gettier case. Okay, the other, or at least one other one, is the sheep on the hill case. So let's suppose that we are in the country, and we're standing like by a road, and we're looking at this big field, and I see something in the field, right, that looks like a sheep, and I help myself to a belief. Hey, there's a sheep in that field. Okay. So on the basis of a perceptual experience as of a sheep, I form a belief, namely that there's a sheep in the field. Okay. Let's suppose that the thing that I'm looking at is actually a rock, right? And so it's a rock that kind of looks like a sheep, right? And so I'm looking at this fake sheep, right? I'm looking at this, not even a fake sheep, it's just a rock that looks like a sheep. But I'm looking at this thing thinking that it's a sheep, and coming to the conclusion um, that there's a sheep in the field. Now, let's suppose that there is a sheep on the other side of like a hill. Like, let's suppose that like we're here and we're looking, when there's the rock, but like the hill kind of deeps down, like steps down, and there's like a sheep like down the hill, and there's actually a sheep in the field, right? So even though I have a justified belief that also is true, right, it seems like I don't know that there's a sheep in the field, right? And this case is interesting because it it raises a connection that the believer has to make with the truth maker, right? So what makes the proposition there is a sheep in the field true? It is the fact that the sheep is in the field. The sheep is the truth maker of that proposition. However, I'm basing that belief about a rock, not the actual truth maker, which is the sheep, right? So it seems like knowledge, there has to be some kind of essential connection between our beliefs and the truth makers of those beliefs, at least for beliefs that are based on perceptual experiences. Okay, so we have another justified true belief that doesn't amount to knowledge. And lastly, um, the fake barn country case. This is a wacky case. Okay, so and you'll look at this one when you read McGrath coming up really soon. But the idea here is that let's suppose that there's a region of Wyoming, say, right, that's full of barns. But all of those barns are barn facades. So I don't know if you've ever seen any of these old Western movies when they have like a town. They always have these like buildings with the fronts on them, right? And you see like in those movies, most of those buildings are just like big sheets of wood that are stilted up and made to look like a building, right? They're not real buildings, they're fake, right? And so this part of the country, right, in Wyoming, is fake barn country. So there's all of these barns that are just like standing up, but not actual real barns, right? But when you're just like driving through and you look at them, they look like real barns. Okay. So you're in an environment full of counterfeit or false barns. Um, and let's suppose that you just like happen upon a real barn, right? So let's just say for the sake of argument that there's one barn that's a real barn in the whole area. And you look at that one real barn and you say, that's a barn, right? Uh, and regardless if you're aware or unaware of the other barns, right? Um, it looks like you don't know. You don't know that the thing that you're looking at is a barn because it's surrounded by counterfeit barns. Because it's in an area that's infected with false barns, it seems like you need more evidence to believe or to know, right, that the thing that you're looking at is an actual barn. Kind of weird, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's a similar way that, like, suppose I have 10 $1 bills in front of me, and I say that 9 of them are counterfeit and 1 of them is real. And you just like form the belief that 1 of them is real at random, right? And you get lucky, right? You just happen to pick the one that's correct, and you believe that that's a real dollar bill. It looks like since it's surrounded by counterfeits, you don't know that that one is the real dollar bill because you just get lucky, right? And so what this case attempts to establish is that um, you can have a justified true belief, right? I mean, you justifiably believe that the thing in front of you is a barn, and it is a barn, right? And same in the dollar bill case as well. But it still seems like yeah, you just got lucky, right? So so the intuition on these cases is that we need an extra condition, an anti-luck condition in our analysis of knowledge, right? Okay, so this was a lot of information. Be sure to understand how each of these counterexamples works, right? And they all propose to show that you can have justified true beliefs that do not amount to knowledge for beliefs that are deduced from things, beliefs that are perceived, as in the sheep case, and you need an anti-luck condition in your analysis of knowledge according to the fake barn country. All right, thank you guys.